When the Spanish first arrived in Tenochtitlan, they were enchanted by its beauty. Great pyramids and towering temples rose from the middle of the lake as though the city itself had emerged from a dream. To the Spanish, there was indeed no other city that could compare in splendor. But it was not always this way. Hello everyone, my name is Chaya, your local Aztec VTuber, and today we are going to explore the formation of the Aztec Triple Alliance, the beginning of an empire. It is a tale of political scheming, betrayals, warfare, and ambition, but most importantly, it is a story that reveals how power truly functioned in central Mexico before the arrival of the Spanish. By the end of this lesson, you will not only have a better understanding of the Aztec Empire, but also the complicated political landscape that shaped the Spanish conquest nearly a century later. Because many of the same strategies that built this empire would eventually contribute to its downfall. Without further ado, let's get into it. Before getting into this epic story, let's establish some vocabulary and general knowledge about the Aztec world in the post-classic era. When referring to this side of history, we often hear the word tribe. It's usually used to describe groups or political entities, but that has led to many misconceptions. For that reason, we will use the framework of ethnic groups and city-states. The Nahua people, for instance, were a large ethnic group in central Mexico, and they're the biggest indigenous group in modern Mexico today. Within the Nahua ethnic group were subgroups like the Tepanec, Chalca, Mexica, and many more. These subgroups had a general shared culture with Nahuatl as a general unifying language, but ultimately they kept distinct identities from each other. These subgroups built and ruled over city-states, which were complex urban centers with governments, economies, social hierarchies, and most importantly, the appointment of a legitimate ruler known as a Tlatoani, a chief speaker. With a Tlatoani set in place, a city-state gained the title of an Altepet. Altepet means water mountain, which refers to how the Nahua people historically settled around a mountain for shelter and as a source of water. It's why city-states were depicted with variations of this mountain glyph. So when you look at the codices, chat, you'll see this a lot. Usually it's like a mountain, and there's like water coming out from the bottom. A specific ethnic group might control multiple Altepets, and a single Altepet could include people from multiple ethnic backgrounds. Politics revolved more around the Altepet than specific ethnic groups themselves. Throughout this lesson, I will be referring to each subgroup by their respective name and their Altepet name. Our key players in this story are going to be the Mexica and their Altepet Tenochtitlan, the Tepanec and two of their Altepet known as Azcapotzalco and Tlacopan, and finally we have the Aculwa and their Altepet known as Texcoco. I will also be using the term Aztec as an umbrella term to describe the general region of central Mexico at the time, as well as the general population and area of influence. So when I say Aztec, I do not mean Mexica. Now, let's talk about marriage. Ooh, marriage. Back then, alliances were everything, and they were often sealed through dynastic marriages amongst the royal houses. The careful weaving of bloodlines was one of utmost importance. A Tlatoani would often take wives from various other Altepets to create bonds and political ties. These women were of high prestige with close family ties with other royal houses. These marriages were carefully recorded in codices, tracing back for generations. After all, one's claim to power was determined by their lineage. To be a blood relative to a powerful ruler or prominent ancestor gave you immediate benefits in the form of alliances and favor. Within these marriages, it was very important to establish a primary wife who would embody the most important alliance for an Altepet. She would be the one to bear the most legitimate heirs to the throne. After all, not every wife was seen as equal. Some were simple concubines with no prestigious bloodline to lay claim to the throne. This is why the primary wife had a powerful role. However, if the king favored a specific wife, her home Altepetz would benefit politically, even if they weren't a primary wife. This created tensions and intense rivalries among the women and even the children. It was its own kind of battleground, filled with political scheming and social maneuvering. Lastly, if no primary wife was appointed, it would quickly result in a power vacuum. So now that we understand ethnic groups, Altepetz, and alliances, let's go back in time to the early 1400s. The Triple Alliance had long yet to be formed. Instead, there was a different powerhouse at play. Our key player is Azcapotzalco, an Altepet formed by the powerful Tepanec people. At the time, the Tepanec dominated the central valley of Mexico. Their Tlatoani was the great lord Nezahualcoyotl. And also, Azcapotzalco means the anthill. So here we have the glyph for Azcapotzalco featuring a prominent red ant. The Mexica were subject to Azcapotzalco, serving as a vassal state. They would offer tribute as well as military strength throughout Azcapotzalco's various conquests. What the Mexica were known for, chat, was that they were very strong warriors. They could put up a fight, bro. So that's why Azcapotzalco was like, hey, we won't bully you guys as long as you pay your taxes and also pay up with your warriors. We want to go conquer this other city over here, so you better send your men and help us because we know we can count on you guys. And the Mexica, they were good fighters, but they were very small, chat. Azcapotzalco, they were like a huge city with a lot of allies. So if Mexica fell out of line, they would get clapped. Like Azcapotzalco would instantly destroy them. So the Mexica, they were like, okay, Azcapotzalco, I'll help you with anything you want. Over time, the Mexica gained favor from their Tepanec overlords. This allowed Lord Huitzilihuit, second king of Tenochtitlan, to ask Lord Tezozomoc for one of his daughter's hands in marriage. And they succeeded! Huitzilihuit married Lady Ayasihuat and made her his primary wife, holding their alliance with Azcapotzalco in highest regard. The couple had a son named Chimalpopoca, who was greatly favored by his grandfather Tezozomoc. With such a powerful alliance, Chimalpopoca was well on his way to becoming the next great king of Tenochtitlan, a perfect candidate of the most prestigious lineage. Things were finally starting to look up for the Mexica, but things went downhill when Queen Ayasihuat died. King Huitzilihuit died soon after, leaving Chimalpopoca on the throne at a relatively young age. Most sources agree on age 20, but some, as in the case with Diego Duran Historia, it goes as far back as 10 years old. Luckily, King Chimalpopoca still had his grandfather's favor and capable advisors to rely on. One advisor being his uncle Itzcoatl, brother to his father Huitzilihuit. Despite that, tension started to rise as the Tepanec saw the Mexica's rising power. Some Tepanec nobles even started to question Lord Tezozomoc's support for his grandson Chimalpopoca and the Mexica by extension. So, when Grandpa Tezozomoc died, it resulted in an outright catastrophe. Not only did his death mark an end to the Mexica's favor, it sparked a violent power struggle throughout the valley. You see, Lord Tezozomoc had many wives and children, which is only natural considering his high status as king of Azcapotzalco, but this proved disastrous as heirs fought for his highly coveted throne after his death in 1426. Before his death, Tezozomoc had appointed Tayatzin, son of his primary wife from the Tlacopan nobility. However, another son by the name Maxtla, who at the time ruled the Altepet of Coyoacan, coveted the throne. Shortly after their father's death, Maxtla staged a coup, killed Tayatzin, the rightful heir, and usurped the throne. Chimalpopoca was also one of the victims in this power struggle. Chimalpopoca was close to Tayatzin, and this was more than enough to be considered a threat. And so Maxtla had Chimalpopoca assassinated, ultimately shattering the bond that the Mexica had built with Azcapotzalco. It is also suspected that Chimalpopoca's death was planned by the Mexica themselves, the main culprit being someone who had the most to gain from the empty throne. That was Itzcoatl, his uncle and trusted advisor, a capable warrior, commander, and politician who knew no fear. But that, of course, is an allegation. Lord Itzcoatl, please don't sue me for defamation. I beg you, because I love you so much. Itzcoatl was never meant to rule. He was son of a slave woman, and therefore had no prestige other than his father Acamapixtli, first king of Tenochtitlan. The legitimate royal line should have continued through Huitzilihuit. But desperate times call for desperate measures. The Mexica needed a brave and tactical leader, one who could guide them through their worst crisis yet. Itzcoatl fit that role perfectly, much so that it is said he outshone everyone else. Lineage did not hold him back one bit. It is said that Itzcoatl's advisors implored him to beg Maxtla for mercy and end the turmoil. Even the Mexica themselves were ready to give themselves up as slaves to the Tepanec than to fight an impossible battle. However, Itzcoatl decided to rise up against Azcapotzalco and take advantage of the chaos. He was smart and he was ambitious, and he also had a trusted advisor who was just as ambitious as he was, his nephew Tlacalel. Together, they would put pieces in place to ensure a grand victory, ensuring the Mexica to be free and independent at last. First, Itzcoatl sought out the allegiance of his nephew, Nezahualcoyotl, a crucial figure in this story. You see, Nezahualcoyotl was the rightful heir to the throne of Texcoco, an Altepet of the Aculwa people. This was significant because Texcoco had existing beef with Azcapotzalco that went way back to when Lord Tezosomoc was still alive and thriving. Let's go back in time a bit and check out Nezahualcoyotl's lore. During Tezosomoc's reign of terror, the Tlatoani of Texcoco was Lord Ixtlilxochitl I. He was the father of Nezahualcoyotl. Due to Azcapotzalco's dominance, King Ixtlilxochitl I had an Azcapotzalco woman as his primary wife. However, he sometimes favored his Mexica wife more. This was due to Tezosomoc treating his Texcoco wife with humiliation in Azcapotzalco. She was not a primary wife, and her roles in ceremonies and politics were very limited. After all, Texcoco wasn't a valued power to them. The Texcoco wife was so miserable, she eventually fled the palace and returned home, remarrying a man from her own town. Bye, Lord Tezosomoc, your peepee was small anyways. Small cactus, crusty ass. When Lord Tezosomoc found out, he was furious. He waged war against Texcoco, giving no room for any sort of negotiation. Tezosomoc was very much a tyrant after all. The Texcoco nobles were killed, and so was Lord Ixtlilxochitl. Tezosomoc placed his own ruling class instead, having the Tepanec ruling over the Aculwa Altepet of Texcoco. However, one of Ixtlilxochitl's sons survived. That was Nezahualcoyotl, son of the Mexica wife Matlacihuatl, who was Itzcoatl's sister. He was 15 when he lost his father. After that, he fled to exile and was raised in Tenochtitlan. Despite being so far away from home, he never forgot who he was as the rightful heir to Texcoco. And now, we're back to Lord Itzcoatl, as he extends his hand to Nezahualcoyotl. Together, they would put an end to the golden age of Azcapotzalco. The first course of action was to put Nezahualcoyotl back on his rightful throne in Texcoco. This meant they had to expel the Tepanec rulers who had been planted there by Lord Tezosomoc. This also meant going against Maxtla himself, as he was the new ruler of the Tepanec. The Mexica would supply military power, and Nezahualcoyotl would rally his people to push back the Tepanec forces. And with their forces combined, they succeeded. Maxtla was said to have fled, and the grand city-state of Azcapotzalco fell to ruin. Their defeat was so bad, it is said that Azcapotzalco became a slave market. a far cry from their days of glory under Tezosomoc. With victory in their hands, Nezahualcoyotl reclaimed his rightful crown in Texcoco, and Itzcoatl became the first emperor of the Mexica. And this is how the Triple Alliance was born. Now, you may be wondering, it's called the Aztec Triple Alliance. Where's the third guy? That spot goes to Tlacopan, also known as Tacuba. It was another Altepet formed by the Tepanec and was sort of a smaller sister state to Azcapotzalco. If you remember, Tezozomoc's primary wife was from Tlacopan. Naturally, they had a distaste for Maxtla after he killed Tayatzin, the rightful heir. When Itzcoatl and Nezahualcoyotl rose against the mighty Azcapotzalco, Tlacopan played a helping hand against their Tepanec brothers. The Tlatoani of Tlacopan was Totoquihuatzin. At this point, Tlacopan had more to gain by switching sides against their sister state, and they did end up winning in the end. Although they had less prominence in the Triple Alliance compared to Texcoco and Tenochtitlan, they still found themselves part of a glorious Triple Alliance. From then on, this powerful alliance would come to dominate the Central Valley of Mexico, creating what is commonly referred to as the Aztec Empire. With their shared military power, they conquered the neighboring city-states and regions, demanding tribute from the fallen Altepet. Tribute included many different goods such as maize, cacao, cloaks, pottery, and yes, even sacrificial victims who were important for fulfilling religious ceremonies. But subjugation didn't necessarily mean a loss of identity. Many Altepet maintained their own customs, rulers, and nobility under Aztec rule. This system would eventually contribute to the Aztecs' downfall, as every Altepet switched sides in order to reap the most benefit. The Aztec Empire was simply not a unified identity. One of the biggest misconceptions about the Aztec and about the Mexica specifically is that they were hated by other quote-unquote tribes, and that people were also happy to ally with the Spanish to get rid of them, which commonly paints the conquistadores as these sort of quote-unquote saviors. But as we saw with the story, changing sides, forming alliances for military aid, and taking advantage of political chaos was pretty normal. Sure, some groups may have had a heated rivalry and grudge against the Mexica like the Tlaxcalteca, but at the end of the day, Cortez's native allies wanted a piece of that pie that the Aztec had been holding onto for almost 100 years. And at the end of the day, the last one laughing is Tezcatlipoca himself, the Lord of Chaos and Change. He saw the end of the Aztec, the end of the Spanish Empire, and will see the end of rulers and powers as history continues to be written. And with that, my friends, we have reached the end. If you enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe and let me know your favorite part in the comments. If you would like to continue discussing all things Mesoamerica, feel free to join the Discord as well. And finally, if you want to catch these lessons live with all of the chaos and extra little details, I stream regularly on Twitch and YouTube. Thank you all so much for watching. Until next time, bye bye!